All right, we begin, though, with our big story here. President Biden pushing forward after last week's unsteady, to say the least, debate performance. Now, all eyes are on the re-election campaign and the president's public appearances. Biden just earlier today promoting his administration's efforts to combat climate change. He also took a moment to slam Donald Trump as well. Take a listen.
Unfortunately, my predecessor and the MAGA Republicans in Congress are trying to undo all this progress. They still deny climate change even exists. They deny climate change even exists. They must be living in a hole somewhere.
Well, meanwhile, Biden's re-election campaign is touting a major fundraising haul, saying that it raised $127 million in June. The campaign calling this its best fundraising month so far. This comes as officials from the Biden camp are trying to ease concerns among donors and lawmakers alike, pushing back on calls for the president to step aside. Sources also confirming to ABC News that President Biden still hasn't had any discussions about his debate performance with top Democratic leadership on Capitol Hill. Also earlier today, Texas Congressman Lloyd Doggett becoming the first sitting Democratic member of Congress, House or Senate, to publicly call on Biden to withdraw as the nominee for president. So I want to bring in our ABC News political director, Rick Klein, for more on this. So, Rick, it's always good to have you here with us. And look, we know that Biden's team is looking to perhaps repair his image by having him do more speeches and interviews, right? They've promised a press conference at this NATO summit. They say he will take questions at that. But really the big news today, Rick, is that the president has agreed to do this sit-down interview with George Stephanopoulos. This is his first interview since this debate. Look, there's a lot at stake here. He has to answer some really serious questions about his fitness for office.
Yeah, and what's been striking about the last couple of days is these aren't questions from Republicans or political enemies. These are people that are on Joe Biden's side. They want to see him win. They want to see Donald Trump defeated. They want to see a Democrat in the White House, and they are worried. And they are worried not just because they saw a bad night, but because they saw someone who they thought had such a poor performance that there were larger concerns and concerns about the transparency about people around him. The fact that there were so few discussions with Capitol Hill leaders, with some of the nation's Democratic governors, suggests that there was a kind of a protection around the president that has a lot of them alarmed. That maybe this is bigger than just a bad night. So there's the questions that are swirling right now, I think, have become really, really serious for the campaign. Having a Democratic member of Congress call for him to step aside, along with this drumbeat of others who are saying that something happened last week that is bigger than just something that you can associate with a bad night.
Right, and you touch on those questions surrounding some of those longtime advisors that many are wondering now, did they shield the president in some way? Look, also, Rick, today for the first time, we're hearing from top congressional Democratic leaders publicly voicing their concerns about Biden as the party's nominee. How might these very public calls for him to step down sway either the president's decision or, in general, the support in the party?
Well, I think something else that's happening at the same time is the polling, and I know we've been talking about that throughout the day. But this doesn't happen in a vacuum. These are political animals. They know what the polls show. They know what it says, and they know that these are serious challenges. And Joe Biden was losing the race by all accounts going into the debate, and the concerns that have not been assuaged in the last 5 days have truly grown. And that's, I think, where you're seeing so many say, we need to hear more. We need to know that this is not something that it's more of a serious condition. If this was a one-off, then he's got to go out there and show it and prove it.
And let's talk about that poll here. You just mentioned it, right? This new CNN poll released today, and it has Vice President Kamala Harris outperforming Biden in a matchup against Trump. Now, she still falls behind Trump, but how much does polling like that reinforce those concerns about his ability to win this election, especially, Rick, when you see Kamala Harris polling better than Biden, specifically against Trump?
Yeah, one of the arguments that the Biden team have used is that he's the only one who can win. Well, if you see those numbers from the vice president, that might call that into question. Another thing that you've heard from people around the president is that the public didn't see it the same way that a lot of the people in the press and pundits saw it, and that doesn't seem to be the case if the numbers are weaker in public polling that's coming out. So the arguments that have been offered to explain away the performance or to explain that it wasn't nearly as bad, I think start to fall away when you see this play out the way it has in the last couple of days. And it has been extraordinary to have not just the poor performance, the universally recognized poor performance, but then several days where there hasn't been anything that's really been done to try to rectify it. The questions at the White House today really didn't get there. We'll see if the interview with George later this week helps solve any of those issues.
Right. He also can't really lean on that argument that he beat him before when you're seeing these polling numbers. But also, Rick, I'm just curious. And when we mentioned there that some are saying Kamala Harris, she's getting support from many on Capitol Hill at this point. But they're also starting to throw out other names as to who could possibly replace President Biden on the ticket as he runs for re-election. Of course, Kamala Harris, but we hear Gavin Newsom. What other names are you hearing?
Governor of Michigan, Gretchen Whitmer, the governor of Colorado, Jared Polis, his name has been out there, Andy Beshear, the governor of Kentucky. Possible that people from the cabinet like Pete Buttigieg, the Secretary of Transportation, himself a former candidate, Senator Amy Klobuchar, who ran before. Look, there are plenty of people on the Democratic bench that are ready to step in, but I think as a functional matter, if Biden were to step aside, if there's no signs that he is, it's almost certain to go to Kamala Harris. She has the edge as the vice president, a financial edge, a name recognition edge, and she can boast of actually having been there, serving and having run before on a national ticket.
Interesting. All right, Rick Klein, it's always so good to have you with us. Thank you so much for being here. And I want to bring our big story now to our panel. So joining us today is our ABC News contributor and SiriusXM radio host, Mike Muse, our GOP strategist, David Polyansky, and ABC News contributor and president of Next Gen America, Christina Ramirez. I'm so happy to have all of you here with us. So, David, look, while the calls for Biden to step down are growing within his own party, the governor out of Wisconsin today, a Republican, said it would be a mistake politically to underestimate Joe Biden. He also called for Republicans to not harp on what people can see with their own eyes. So what is the best play here for Republicans when you hear the former governor of Wisconsin say something like that?
Well, sure. Look, I think everybody wants to be respectful of the office of the presidency and certainly the president himself. But outside of your Article 2 constitutional requirements for the office, the next minimum threshold is fitness for office. And unfortunately for the president and Democrats around him, he failed to meet that moment in front of 50 million viewers the other night. And to Rick's point earlier, we've spent 5 days talking about that. And so I think it's a real challenge for Democrats now as they try to push back against the narrative while at the same time trying to fix politically what a mess they've found themselves in. And so I think it's incumbent upon Republicans to focus on our message, which continues to be on issues like immigration. It continues to be on issues like inflation and the economy as a whole, and allow Democrats to try to figure out how they're going to approach this going forward. But let's be clear, the Democrats have one of two choices. Either they ride a Biden presidency into January and not only lose the White House and Congress with it, or they make some changes and maybe have a shot at reclaiming the White House. And it's a tough task to ask anybody. But as Republicans, we just need to stay on message and allow Democrats to try to figure it out for themselves.
It's certainly a tough task if they were to switch the top of this ticket here, Christina. And you heard Rick, right? He ran down a whole list of names that could possibly replace the president. Kamala Harris at the top of that list, though. But Christina, do you feel like registered Democrats had a fair shot early on to really choose their nominee? I mean, do you feel like Biden would have been the nominee had there been a real Democratic primary?
Biden has been very popular and was elected in 2020. I think that when we saw the debate, we saw a lot of questions not get answered, both by Donald Trump and Joe Biden. It was not a strong debate performance. I don't think anyone would say that, and Biden himself didn't say that. I think what Democrats are going to try and lean on and show, which most Democratic voters truly care about, is defeating Donald Trump and the vision, the dystopian vision on many of the issues, whether it's on LGBTQ equality, abortion access, climate change, issues that the Republican and Democrats are very, very far apart from, and a vision that most Democrats do not want to see enacted and feel a real threat by. However, the Biden campaign does have to answer about the legitimate concerns and questions that people have about his age. And they need to figure out how they do that in a way that really responds to those concerns. It's not enough to say that it was just a bad night, I think, for a lot of voters.
And look, Mike, we are barreling towards not only the election, but of course the conventions as well. So, Mike, the Democratic Party has to figure this out one way or the other. Either they keep Biden as the nominee or they replace him. Mike, what is the grace period?
Kana, I don't know what the grace period is, but whatever it is, the time is ticking for a number of different reasons. One, just look at it from a logistical point of view. When you look at the state of Nevada in terms of state ballots, the state of Nevada said that the Democratic Party, and for both parties, they had until June, the last Friday in June, in order to change the name at the top of the ticket. After that, it's already set, and then they have to go into litigation to be able to decide how they're going to remove that person at the top of the ticket. And some of the only exceptions that is for mental incapacity. But what does that mean when you look at who is mentally incapacitated in order to qualify the threshold to be removed from the ballot? The second thing is the Democratic Convention is next month. I understand that the Democratic donor class is feeling unsettled. I do understand that there are the leadership of the Democratic Party who also too feel unsettled. But Kana, as you and I often talk about, people I listen to, the everyday person, they still, after the debate on my radio show, called in and said they still are going to vote for President Biden, and they do believe he is the best one to do it. So we are in a conundrum where you have two sides, the political elite, but then you have the average American who are not being polled, who are interested, who I'm sure, Kana, are reflective in the pledged delegates come the DNC who may want to keep voting for President Biden at the DNC, which could cause complete chaos within the party. So they have very short amount of time of grace period to wrap their minds around all these different factors that you and I are talking about right now on the show. Oh, and Kana, for the X factor, Democrats have different feelings about all the names that have been mentioned already just on this telecast right here. So there is no consensus on who should be the next nominee, if not President Biden.
There is a whole litany of decisions to be made here, and they need to be made fast. Mike, David, and Christina, thank you all for your time.